The idea of 2 weeks on my grandparents' farm sounded like a punishment at first. Some rustic penance for burning out mid-semester. But when I hit that breaking point, the kind where even the sound of subway brakes made my teeth clench, I messaged my grandmother and asked if the guest room was still open. It was. So here I was, dragging a city-worn duffel bag through knee-high grass, squinting under a sky so wide it made me dizzy. There was no smog, no honking, no flashing lights. Just the low hum of crickets and the faint scent of cut hay riding on the wind. The farmhouse looked just like I remembered it from childhood. Chipped white paint, rusted wind chimes, and that crooked screen door that always slammed too loud. My grandmother met me at the porch, arms open, flower on her apron like a badge of honor. I hugged her tightly, inhaling a mix of lavender and pie crust. My grandfather was inside, watching baseball at a volume that could wake the dead. But she shushed me when I offered to go greet him. "He'll come when he's hungry," she said with a wink. I dropped my things in the guest room and came back out for some air. That's when I saw him. Out by the barn, half hidden in shadow, was a man swinging an axe with rhythmic precision. The sun had dipped low, painting everything gold, except him. He moved like a figure carved from dusk itself. Boots planted firm in the dirt, shirt clinging to his back, sleeves rolled to the elbow, exposing strong forearms darkened by years of sun. His face was mostly obscured by the brim of a worn-out hat, but what I could see was weathered and sharp. He looked up. I froze. Our eyes met for just a moment. No nod, no wave, just a measured gaze that skimmed over me like I was something to be assessed, or maybe judged. Then, just as quickly, he turned back to the wood and brought the axe down again with a thud that echoed into the stillness. I lingered on the porch longer than necessary, pretending to check my phone even though I had no signal. Something about the way he looked at me, unapologetic, unblinking, stayed with me. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't exactly warm either. It was like he was trying to decide something. After dinner, I asked my grandmother who he was. "Oh, that's Cole," she said, setting down a plate of cornbread. "Been working here almost 20 years. Keeps to himself, mostly. Quiet sort, but reliable. Cole." Even the name sounded rough-edged. I nodded, trying to act like I hadn't been completely fixated by the man's silence. But later, lying in the creaky twin bed beneath a faded quilt, I found my thoughts circling back to him. That glance, that stillness, that strange weight in the air. Maybe it was just me, out of place and overstimulated from too much city noise and not enough sleep. Or maybe there was something else in that look, something I hadn't expected. I wasn't used to silence that had weight. Back in the city, silence meant boredom or disconnect. Here it felt deliberate. Even the wind through the trees carried a kind of presence, like everything watched you quietly. Cole, especially. I didn't see much of him the first couple days, but I always knew when he was near. The creak of a barn door, the thump of boots on dry dirt, the steady rhythm of an axe splitting logs. He didn't announce himself. He just existed in this space like he'd grown from it, like the land itself had made him and left him here to tend it. I tried not to care. I tried to keep my distance. But something about him kept pressing at the edges of my thoughts. To prove I wasn't just a soft-palmed guest, I volunteered to help my grandfather with the fences. Nothing major, just hammering nails back into place and tightening sagging wires. Still, the work left blisters. I wore gloves, then ditched them to feel more capable. My hands ached by evening, and I smelled like cedar and sweat. For once, I didn't mind. Cole never said much. If I crossed paths with him, he'd nod. Sometimes. But mostly, he spoke in actions, tossing a tool over without needing to be asked, moving hay bales with fluid, quiet strength, repairing a gate before I even noticed it needed fixing. I caught myself watching him more than I wanted to admit, not in some open, gawking way, just tracking. A glance here, a longer pause there. The way his shirt clung to his back when he worked in the heat. The deliberate way he moved, like everything he did was necessary and nothing was wasted. I studied him the way you study a fire across the room. You don't know what it'll do, but you're warmed by it just the same. Still, I told myself it was just curiosity. He was different. He was older. Rugged in a way most people my age were too curated to be. That's all it was. Curiosity. Or at least I thought so until the fence incident. It was a blistering morning, already near 90 degrees by the time I got out there. I left my shirt on the post while I worked, sweat running down my spine, hammer gripped tightly in one hand. I wasn't trying to show off. If anything, I just wanted to finish before the sun turned me into toast. But I could feel the air around me change when he showed up. I didn't even hear him approach. One minute I was alone, the next I looked up, and there he was. Cole stood just inside the tree line, leaning against a fence post like he'd been watching for a while. His arms were crossed, his hat tilted low over his face. But I could still feel his eyes on me. Steady, unblinking, unreadable. I froze with the hammer midair. My skin prickled with heat that had nothing to do with the sun. He didn't look away. It wasn't lewd. It wasn't even particularly intense. But it was focused, like he was reading something in me I hadn't meant to show. I cleared my throat and went back to hammering. Missed the nail completely on the next swing. Swore under my breath. I heard the low crunch of his boots approaching. My pulse ticked higher with each step. "Hold the post tighter," he said. His voice was low, rough, like gravel warmed in the sun. He knelt beside me, placed one strong hand on the base of the fence post, and waited. I tried again. The nail drove clean. I didn't look at him. "Better," he muttered, then stood and walked away without another word. I sat there, heart thudding, staring at the dented wood. What was that? Was he just helping? Was that his way of correcting me? Or was there something under the surface? Some current that ran between us when we got too close? That night I kept replaying the moment. The way he looked at me, the silence, the brief, dry touch of his hand against mine when he adjusted the post. Was he just sizing me up? Judging my form? Or did he look at me the way I was starting to look at him? I didn't know. But I knew I wasn't imagining the weight of his gaze. The storm rolled in fast. One minute the sky was just overcast, the kind of soft gray that made you think of naps and soup. The next, thunder cracked low in the distance, and the air turned dense with electricity and the sharp tang of wet dirt. My grandmother yelled from the porch, "Get inside, Han! You're not used to these kinds of storms." I was halfway to the tool shed when the downpour hit. Cold, fat drops slammed against my shoulders like warning shots. I bolted toward the barn, already soaked by the time I slid the heavy door open and ducked inside. It was dim, smelled like hay, dust, old wood, and something warm, like oil and earth and sweat. I shook off, wiping my face with my sleeve. My shirt clung to me like a second skin. I was alone, or so I thought. Then I heard it, slow footsteps from the far corner. Cole. He emerged from behind a stack of hay bales, lantern in one hand, sleeves rolled up, that ever-present hat tilted just enough to shadow his eyes. He didn't say anything, just nodded once in acknowledgement, then hung the lantern on a rusty hook. Golden light spread across the space like honey poured over darkness. It hit his face from the side, casting half of him in firelight, half in dusk. I swallowed something I couldn't name. He was working on a metal toolbox, fidgeting with the latches. I walked over, figuring I might as well be useful. "What are you fixing?" I asked. "Handles loose." His voice was soft, matter-of-fact. "Won't close proper." I crouched beside him, knees creaking against the old wooden floor. The barn creaked too, settling, groaning under the weight of wind and rain. Every sound felt sharper in the quiet, even our breaths. We worked in silence. My hands were still clumsy with tools, but he didn't correct me this time. He let me try, let me fail a few times before handing over the right wrench. Then, without a word, he reached behind him and pulled out a scratched-up metal thermos, unscrewed the lid, offered it to me. "Coffee?" he asked. I hesitated, not because I didn't want it, but because the way he held it out, just between us, his hands steady, fingers rough, felt strangely intimate. I reached out to take it and our fingers brushed. The contact was brief, fleeting, but it landed like lightning across my skin. "Thanks?" I muttered, suddenly conscious of how warm the coffee felt in my hands. We didn't speak for a while after that. The rain kept hitting the roof like a soft drumbeat. The barn glowed, lantern light bouncing off old tools and ropes and dust in the air. It felt like time folded in on itself. Just the two of us in that sliver of quiet, the storm cocooning everything else outside. He leaned back against a wooden beam, arms crossed, watching the storm through a crack in the wall. I sat across from him, sipping coffee, watching him. He didn't smile much, maybe never, but he had a stillness I admired. He looked like someone who didn't run from things, who stayed even when it hurt. "I don't think I ever asked," I said, breaking the hush. "How long have you worked here?" He took a beat before answering. "Since I was 20. I blinked. "Seriously? That long?" He nodded. "Didn't plan on staying. But the work was steady. Your granddad's fair. The place, it's quiet. And quiet's hard to find." I considered that. "Quiet can be good," I said, "until it gets too loud in your own head." He looked at me then, a long, searching look. Nothing showy, nothing dramatic, just his eyes meeting mine across the barn, the coffee between us, the storm outside. That look held something, understanding, recognition, or maybe just permission. We didn't smile. We didn't look away. The air felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. My heart beat harder, not in panic, but in awareness. Of him, of myself, of the way the world had narrowed to this barn, this breath, this moment. I hadn't expected this. Not from him, not from me, not from some middle-of-nowhere farm visit meant to clear my head. But he made the silence feel full. And the way he looked at me, I wasn't expecting him to make me feel this way. Couldn't sleep. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and damp, the kind that clings to your skin like a second layer. Crickets had returned. So had the frogs. I lay in the dark, the window open just enough to let in the sounds of the night, hoping they'd lull me into something close to rest. But all I could think about was the barn. And him. Cole's eyes in the lantern light. The slow, weighted way he looked at me like I was something he wasn't supposed to want, but maybe did anyway. The way our fingers had touched around the thermos. Accidental. Electric. I kept replaying it like a scene I didn't know the ending to. I rolled over, restless, heart pounding in a way that didn't feel fair. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. Not here, not now, not with him. He was older, quiet, weathered in a way that said he'd lived entire lives before I even learned how to cook pasta. But still, I drifted off somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning. When I did, I dreamed. We were back in the barn. Same golden light, same storm outside, but this time it was quieter. Still, Cole stood across from me again. Only this time he didn't keep his distance. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, and reached out. His fingers brushed mine, then gently curled around them. He didn't say a word, just held my hand like it was a promise. His skin was warm, rough, comforting. And then I woke up, sweating, confused, heart galloping like I just run 10 blocks. The sheets were twisted around my legs. My mouth was dry. I sat up in the dark, rubbing my face. It was just a dream, a fantasy, probably stitched together by tension and touch-starved nerves and my own overactive imagination. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. The next morning, I avoided the barn, made a point to hang around the kitchen longer than usual, helping my grandmother knead dough even though I was terrible at it. I took a walk along the gravel road, kicking stones, letting the sun bake the top of my head just to keep my thoughts somewhere grounded. Every time I looked toward the barn, something in my chest tugged. But I didn't go. I wasn't ready to see him. Not after that dream. Not with that softness still clinging to me like dew. I figured I'd stay invisible long enough and he'd just carry on like normal. Maybe he'd think I'd gone into town. Maybe he wouldn't notice at all. But later that afternoon, I found myself alone by the side of the house, fiddling with a broken gate latch just to keep my hands busy. That's when I heard his footsteps. I didn't turn. Didn't need to. I could feel him behind me, steady, unhurried. Then a shadow stretched beside mine. And his voice, low and matter-of-fact. "You dropped this." I finally looked over. Cole stood beside me, holding out a folded handkerchief. It was plain, white, frayed edges, probably washed 100 times. Nothing special. But the way he held it, carefully, like it mattered, something in me clenched. "I don't think that's mine," I said quietly. He shrugged. "Maybe not. Thought you might want it anyway." I reached out and took it. Our fingers didn't touch this time. But it didn't matter. The gesture itself felt heavier than it should have been. Like he was offering something else entirely. An excuse to talk. Or maybe a question he wasn't ready to ask out loud. He didn't linger. Just gave a nod and walked off, back toward the barn. I stood there for a long time, handkerchief in hand, heart pounding in my throat. No, it wasn't mine. But I kept it anyway. Bathing in the outdoor tank was one of those things I never thought I'd do. It sat behind the barn, half shaded by an old oak tree. The water was always a little too cold in the morning and perfectly warmed by the sun in the afternoon. No plumbing, no tile, no curtain. Just a wooden platform, a tin basin, and the wide open sky above. I waited until late afternoon that day, until the sun had dropped low enough to drape everything in gold and shadow. I wasn't modest exactly, but I wasn't reckless either. This wasn't my place. I was just passing through. I stripped down to my boxers and stepped into the tank, letting the water rise to my hips, shivering a little before settling in. There was something oddly peaceful about it, washing off the dust and sweat from the day while cicadas hummed in the trees. Then I heard the footsteps, boots, slow, deliberate, crunching across the gravel path behind the barn. My breath hitched. I didn't turn around, I didn't have to. I already knew who it was. Cole. His pace didn't quicken, didn't pause. He walked by like this was just another part of the day. But just before he disappeared from view, I saw his head turn slightly. A glance. That's all. Not a stare. Not a double take. Just one passing look. Calm. Unreadable. But it landed like a thunderclap in my chest. Later, we ended up working side by side near the tool shed. The sun was starting to set again. 2 golden evenings in a row, but this one felt heavier, like something unsaid was pressing down on the air. We didn't talk for a while. I passed him nails. He hammered without missing once. The scent of sweat and cedar hung between us, grounded by the slow chorus of crickets coming to life in the tall grass. Then, without planning to, I spoke. "I didn't think I'd like it here." He didn't look up, just waited. "It's quiet," I added. "Real." He finally turned to glance at me. His eyes weren't sharp, just clear. "It's honest," he said. "It's enough for me." I nodded, then looked away. But my eyes didn't stay gone long. I found them drifting again, down to his hands, the veins along his wrist, the way his knuckles were weathered and scarred like old leather. His hands told stories. I wanted to read them all. And then he looked up and caught me. I didn't snap away fast enough. Our eyes locked. I was still holding a handful of screws, and suddenly they felt like they weighed 10 pounds. Silence stretched between us. He didn't smirk, didn't raise an eyebrow. He just looked at me, like he'd been expecting this. Then he said softly, "You've been looking a lot." My mouth went dry. I swallowed. "Yeah." That's all I could say. No excuses, no denial, no laugh to lighten the moment. Just the truth laid out like fresh soil. He nodded once, slow. His gaze didn't drift. He didn't follow up with some clever remark. He just let it be. And somehow that was worse. Or better. Couldn't tell. I turned back to the shed, trying to focus on the tools, on the routine, on anything except the fact that my heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. He didn't move, just stood beside me, calm as ever. The tension between us was different now. Not imagined. Not one-sided. Real. I didn't know what to do with that, but I didn't want to look away anymore. I told myself I was just going to check the fence. It was almost dark. The sun had dipped past the treeline, leaving behind a trail of deep oranges and cooling shadows. The farm had gone still in the way it always did at night, like it was exhaling after a long day. I had no reason to be out there. The fence was fine. I knew it, I'd hammered the nails myself earlier in the week. But I also knew where Cole would be. So I carried a flashlight, a pair of pliers I didn't need, and a knot in my stomach I couldn't quite untangle. I found him exactly where I expected, down by the back fence, the one that bordered the field beyond the barn. He was kneeling in the dirt, coiling up a length of wire, lantern propped on a post nearby, throwing gold onto the side of his face and catching in the scruff along his jaw. He didn't flinch when I walked up, just looked over, steady as always. "You lose something?" he asked. I shook my head. "Just thought one of the posts was a little loose." He looked at the fence, then back at me. He didn't call the lie, didn't need to, but he stood, dusted off his hands, and joined me anyway. We worked in silence for a while. Me pretending to check the nails, him handing me tools I didn't ask for. The breeze was cool against my skin. Somewhere in the trees, an owl called out low and mournful. The moon began to rise behind us, casting the field in a soft silver haze. It felt like we were standing on the edge of something quiet, something waiting. I leaned against the fence rail, heart pounding. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He didn't answer right away, but he stopped what he was doing and faced me fully. I met his eyes. "Am I imagining it?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Or do you see me?" The words hung there, fragile in the night air. He stared at me for a long moment. His face gave nothing away, but something shifted behind his eyes. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. "You're not imagining it," he said, voice low. "But I wasn't gonna say anything." "Why not?" "Because you're young," he said, his gaze drifting over my face like it hurt to look too long. "And I'm not. You've got places to go. A life waiting somewhere else." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that maybe I didn't know where I was going, that maybe, for the first time in a long time, standing here in the dark with someone who made the silence feel full, I didn't want to go anywhere. "Maybe," I said instead, "but I'm here now." The breeze kicked up, brushing my hair across my forehead. I didn't move, neither did he. Our hands were both resting on the fence rail, not touching, just close enough to feel the warmth between them. And then, slowly, deliberately, I shifted mine just enough. So did he. Our fingers met, not clasped, not tangled, just resting beside each other, knuckle to knuckle, skin to skin. Not a kiss, but something more intimate than that, something quieter. A choice. The night was silent but alive with crickets and wind and the soft creak of old wood beneath our weight. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my wrists, in the tips of my fingers where they pressed against his. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. In that stillness, something passed between us. Something that didn't need explanation or labels or timelines. It was enough that it was real, that it was mutual, that we were both standing in the same place at the same time, choosing not to look away. It happened the night the air turned heavy again, just before another storm rolled in, the kind that makes the trees go still and the sky feel too close. Couldn't sleep. Again. But this time I didn't try to. I pulled on a hoodie, stepped into my boots, and made my way through the tall grass toward the barn. The door creaked like it always did, and the scent hit me immediately. Earth, hay, metal, and the faintest trace of old smoke. I didn't need a light. I knew the way by now. He was already there, sitting against a hay bale, lantern beside him, sleeves rolled up, a book in his lap he clearly hadn't been reading. Our eyes met and he didn't flinch, didn't ask what I was doing. He just nodded once, slow and simple, and I walked toward him. I didn't say anything, neither did he. I sat beside him, not touching, just close enough for our shoulders to almost meet. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full. Eventually, he reached over and handed me a folded blanket. No words, just the soft shuffle of fabric. We draped it across our legs, shoulder to shoulder, eyes ahead. The lantern flickered against the old wood, casting shadows that danced along the rafters. After a while, I said, "I used to think quiet meant something was missing." He looked over at me. "Now?" he asked. "I think it just means there's nothing left to prove." He didn't reply, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch, just a little. Felt like the barn was holding its breath. Outside, the wind began to rise again, low and steady. Inside, everything stilled. Then, slowly, carefully, his hand found mine under the blanket. He didn't grab it. He held it like it was something rare, something you take your time with. His thumb brushed gently along the back of my fingers. Once, then again, like a question and its answer all at once. I let myself lean into him. My head rested against his shoulder, and he didn't move. He just stayed warm, steady, grounding me in a way I didn't know I needed until that moment. We didn't talk about what it was. We didn't define it. But the silence between us said enough. Said everything. Told me he saw me. Not the version I projected in crowded rooms or on dating apps or over brunch with friends who talked too fast and listened too little. He saw the version of me that liked slowness, that liked stillness, that liked the way his hands knew exactly how to hold. Not possessively, but protectively. We stayed there like that for what felt like hours. Or maybe it was just a few long minutes that decided to stretch. At one point, he reached up and brushed a piece of hay from my hair. That was it. That small gesture. And it almost broke me, because no one had ever done something so gentle for me without expecting something back. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't about proving something. It was about being seen. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to earn it. The morning I was supposed to leave, the world felt too quiet. I stood at the edge of the bed, folding shirts with more care than I needed to. Every crease felt like a goodbye I didn't want to make. My grandparents were already up. I could hear my grandmother humming in the kitchen, the smell of biscuits and bacon drifting through the old floorboards. The farm looked the same. The trees swayed in the same rhythm. The crickets had quieted with the dawn. But everything in me felt different. The duffel bag lay open on the bed, half-packed. I stared at the last shirt in my hand, a soft gray one I'd barely worn, and didn't move. Cole hadn't said anything the night before. No questions, no assumptions, just a soft touch and the weight of his presence beside me. I didn't even know if he'd be there when I walked out the door, but somehow I knew I'd see him, and I did. He was leaning against the barn rail, same as ever, hat low, arms crossed, the early sun catching in his beard like a quiet fire. I walked over slowly, heart knocking against my ribs. He looked up as I approached, but didn't speak. I did. "I'm heading out soon," I said, voice soft. He nodded once. Figured. A long pause stretched between us, filled with the sound of rustling grass and birds waking in the trees. Then he said, "You'll be all right." I looked at him, trying to read something in his face. "But," he added, "if you ever need stillness again, it's here." He didn't ask me to stay. And somehow that meant more than if he had. Because it wasn't about obligation. It wasn't about a promise. It was about a door left open. A choice. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He straightened up, adjusted his hat. "Take care of yourself." I turned to walk back toward the house, my chest tight and full at the same time. But I only made it halfway to the porch before I stopped. I stood there for a moment, then unzipped my bag, pulled out that soft gray shirt, and left it out. Just one shirt. The rest stayed in the bag. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't forever. It was just a start. A way of saying, I'm not ready to disappear just yet. I looked back toward the barn, and he was still watching me. Not smiling, just seeing. Really seeing. And for the first time in a long time I felt real. Not as someone running away, but as someone worth staying for. I thought I came here to disappear, but he looked at me like I existed. And I think I want to stay even just a little longer. If you've ever found connection in an unexpected place, or just believe in quiet love that doesn't need loud words, leave a blue heart in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more slow burn love stories. Like if this one made you feel something. Share with someone who still believes in being truly seen. Because sometimes the quietest stories say the most.